Welcome to The Truth in This Art, your source for conversations at the intersection of arts, culture, and community. I am your host, Rob Lee, and I'm thrilled to have you here with us today. Next, our guest is the co-founder of Charm City Fringe, an organization dedicated to showing Baltimore's vibrant and unconventional performing arts scene. Through his work with Charm City Fringe and the annual Charm City Fringe Festival, he has helped create a platform for bold, innovative theater and arts in Baltimore, making it a citywide celebration of creativity and community. Please welcome Zach Michel. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rob.
Thank you for coming on. And this is a little time in the making. We first touched base, I think it was before the summer, slightly before the summer, maybe.
Yeah, I think we got it in right before, maybe like early June.
Yeah, early June sounds about right. And so I'm happy that we're able to, in this sort of full arc, be able to get to this conversation today. And so definitely sure to be a treat. And as I dove into and checked out your background, I have questions now. I have several questions, and I hope you're ready to
Yeah,
answer these questions.
let's do it. Ask away.
Before we get into the larger questions, I want to give you the space to introduce yourself. I think there's a lot of juice, a lot of energy in it, and especially with how people present themselves. Like, we may know you from sort of this scene. We may know you from like theater, from Charm City Fringe, but there's multiple layers to you, much like an onion. So if you will, give us your introduction. And, I got a second part to that question, but I at least want to go off from there.
Yeah. And you can cut this part out. Do we need to wait for sirens, by the way, since they're, coming
Barely here.
All right, cool. Okay. Could you ask that question again? You said just interview, just intro kind of.
Yeah. Before we get into the larger questions, I like to give you the space to introduce yourself. I think often, something is missed. We get those online bios. There's a few bios out there about me, and I'm like, that's not how I to present myself. That's not who I am. He's a journalist. He's a writer. I was like, I'm none of those things. I'm just a podcaster. So if you will, introduce yourself in your own words.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'm gonna do that, but let's. Okay. Take a breath. I'm like amped up from work. All right. So, honestly, I'd say, man, that's such a big question. I want to know what did you hear about me? And then let's pivot off of that. Like what comes up when you Google me? I have Googled myself, but mostly I just see like Charm City Fringe Festival.
I see Charm City Fringe Festival, theater aficionado. That's the word that I see floating out there. I see absurd comedy, which that's always fun. I see National Geographic. I see a lot of things out there.
I can't believe you found National Geographic. Like I'm really surprised to see that. So, I mean, we're not going to go back to when I was born, but that is the first place I worked after college, and it was impactful and it was fantastic. I studied geography and environmental science. I also studied economics, and I wanted to save the planet. I was always fascinated in the arts. The thing that I wanted to do most was play music. I'd been a bassist for, probably 10, no, 10 or 15 years. I was a bassist and, dabbled in drums and guitar and everything, did a little bit of recording, just gigged around a little bit in Baltimore and around Maryland. But, it's a relationship to be in a band, and it's 5 relationships depending on how many people, and couldn't quite ever have one that got off the ground. And so, geography and environmental systems, it was, for the main focus. And it's funny because, I think had I stuck to the arts, things might have been a little different, because ultimately I graduated into, the Great Recession. Managed to get a 1-year contract with Nat Geo, had a great time, and then found myself competing with, people with master's degrees, people with 5 and 10 years of experience, that were applying for the same jobs that I was with 1 year of experience, and found myself out of work, and a bunch of my friends were also out of work. And essentially that led me back to the arts. I was working retail. I was just finding whatever job I could. And a few of us together kind of looked at each other and said, well, shoot, we thought we'd be professionals right now, and instead we're working at liquor stores, you know, and that's fine, but it wasn't scratching the itch. So we, started looking like what can we do creatively? What else can we do to at least have an outlet? And that's where the arts came in, um, and kind of have been pivoting and working with both ever since.
So, and thank you. I think we're definitely going to be touching back on different pieces of that. I'm not going to bury the lead too far, but
Yeah.
you know, I'm always curious where that inkling begins. Like so, take us back to like you mentioned music, drums and bass, not drum and bass, the genre, but
Yeah.
drums
Yeah.
and bass. And so, take us back to like where does that begin? That initial spark that you were interested in something creative. Like I can pinpoint this period where I saw a comic and I was like, I want to draw that. And I wanted to be an illustrator. That was what my initial journey was going to be before podcasting. And I've said this recently. The series of An Evening with Kevin Smith was one of the reasons why I started podcasting,
Huh.
which a lot of people would have no idea.
Yeah, to be honest, I thought that the arts were just something that other people did, and it was just an impossible uh, ambition. It just seemed so far to reach because no one in my family or immediate circle was doing the arts, even as a hobby growing up, until my sister, older sister, 2 years older, and she was a musician and, just being a little brother, looked up to her. And that is what got me interested and kind of the bug for doing it myself.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, like I played in the band in elementary school through high school, but I think it was seeing someone else do it. And on top of that, my sister and my dad both were, huge music aficionados. So I'd literally wake up to Neil Young or Bruce Springsteen or the Beatles at like 100 decibels, like Saturday and Sunday mornings.
Yeah.
It was not pleasant, but it was kind of speaks to the larger fact that music was just perennially on,
Yeah.
and that was my entryway. Yeah, that's what got me going.
It makes sense. And I touched on earlier when we did the backwards move of so what's out there? What's out there? Like when
Yeah,
you
yeah,
Google search me. So talk a bit about because I see the background. It has the performing arts and it has writing, music. Obviously, I see a little filmmaking, theater, and of course the absurd comedy. And that's I think we this is the thing that we kind of matched on when we were talking. I was like, all right,
yeah.
this guy's kind of funny. So I'm curious, where do they intersect with you? Like, is it, hey, these are different interests and I can find a way to combine them, that you maybe discovered one of these mediums when you were doing maybe something else, but talk about how they serve each other, how they intersected.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people who are creatives probably have a number of outlets. I mean, some people maybe have the one, but I don't think it's unique to have a number of creative interests,
Yeah.
Not necessarily that you're good at all of them, Bruce Willis had a music video and he had an album and I don't know that anyone bought it, but I don't think the guy was just like on a whim. I'm guessing. I'm gonna
Yeah.
guess that he's just on a whim. Russell Crowe has a band. Um, Jared Leto has what 30 Seconds to Mars,
Yeah.
and so I think it's new that creatives have other creative outlets. I think that it takes so much effort to do one that typically you don't get to explore. Once you take it takes hold, you might not explore the others. But I don't know that I'm necessarily unique. But some of it also, having said that, is almost assuredly rooted in ADHD, which I'm definitely on that spectrum. And, like I love to learn. And I think that, when you start digging into one creative avenue, it's just a type of thinking. And so, you might be wanting to tell a story or express yourself through music, but then you might start learning, oh, there's ways to express, through video or writing or I like to know how things work,
Yeah.
and in my case it's not necessarily mechanical, it's more artistic and the mind and creating projects, so that's where I've kind of dug in.
That makes sense. Like when I think through this, I want to get into, I'm really curious about minutia. And I like to get into like the weeds of like, what's the thinking that went into that? Like, great,
Mhm.
there's the technical stuff. Wow, you did this and this is your technique. Fantastic. But also, what is it about the individual that led to them to make that painting or to write that story or to make that play or to even pursue music? Those are the things that I'm very curious about because I'm not an art,
Yeah.
critic. I'm not an art
Yeah.
historian.
No, absolutely. And I think what's, oh man, I mean, I found myself doing that even, um, lately, just reading or listening up on, how different movies or stories were written. And it's fascinating because I've learned, so much is, um, I don't want to say obvious, but once when you get the background, you see, oh, this person's pulling from their life or they're pulling from direct experience, and it's creative. They're manifesting it in a story or in a movie, but or in a song, but it's often coming from somewhere, And when you take a lifetime of experiences and influences, uh, and then you take your own vision and apply them to it, it
Yeah.
becomes, if you're skilled and lucky and talented and you work hard at it, like it comes out uniquely your own. And you don't see all those parts behind it, especially if you do a good job, you aren't going to find it unless you write about it or someone really digs in. And so yeah, I find that like you, I love seeing how that comes together. And I'm still, very much early in that journey
Yeah.
putting that together, but yeah.
I think being able to do as many of these interviews that I've done, I looked at it earlier. I'm technically, as we're recording this today, and there are 787 episodes that have posted, you know,
So,
of this
so which one
podcast.
will this be?
This may actually be 800 or close to 800. So, we'll see where we're at. I'll make sure
All right.
the number next to you. But it's that thing where, I have those conversations with folks and it's literally I frame it as a conversation. This is not the exhaustive expose of one's career. I'm qualified to do that, or interested in doing that, but being able to shoot the breeze with someone and get, maybe some insights, maybe some background. And a lot of times things that the guest isn't often sharing or isn't sharing in that way. I think that adds to a well-roundedness and in the other intent that's there, and definitely is one of the reasons why I'm really excited to have you in here is it extends on what art is, what creativity is, and who can be creative and so on, which we're definitely going to be talking about in a moment. But I wanted to tap back in on one thing. So I think, as you touched on, it's not just sort of one thing that creative folks have. It's usually more than one thing. And
Mhm.
I find another thing that creative folks have is probably a day job. so
Yeah.
so let's talk about sort of your thoughts on that and sort of the importance of it and coming into things that you touched on earlier with sort of your time at Nat Geo and sort of that atmosphere and that environment of like where the economy and the job market were at. Like, you know, I do this, I have a day job. The day job I look at as the funder to fund my cool stuff. And I often make those choices of I want to do this stuff. I want to do this fun stuff, but you need money, you need security. And I saw this interview recently. It was a segment with Rick Rubin, and he was talking about separating those things. Like you shouldn't, at least in his head, you shouldn't be your art should not be your full job all the time. You should do something maybe creative, but it's this idea if you start losing love for it because having that job sometimes it's not the funnest thing. Sometimes it's a lot of BS that you're dealing with, and you don't want that to insert itself into your creative art that you
Mm.
love and you enjoy. It's not saying it always should be easy and always should be peaches and cream, but it's sort of one of those considerations. And I can speak first-handedly. Whenever, and I was sharing this with you before we got started, whenever I start to insert business into this, it starts to get weird because it feels more businessy and doesn't really work as well as it should work when I'm just doing it for the creative pursuit. So speak on that where sort of the having the day job, having the that work life and then that sort of creative life, where they kind of intersect and serve each other and where they should kind of be separate. Oil and vinegar. Well, oil and water. Oil and vinegar taste great together.
Man,
I know it's a big
that's
question.
yeah, that's a good one. I mean, Because you know what? I think that for me, I thrive on structure.
Sure.
So having a job can be really separate from my art can be really helpful to provide a daily structure, also dependable income. You know, I've had that conversation with, friends and girlfriends about uh, what happens when you give up a part-time job or no job and theoretically have more time for your art in favor of a full-time job.
Sure.
And hearing stories like positive stories of it, you're not searching for work then. You're also not, wondering if you're going to be able to pay the bills. Um, you have consistency and there's a lack of mental effort that goes in then. And so as long as your day job doesn't exhaust you, as long as it's not, I think, mentally draining. Obviously, work is work, but as long as it is a healthy environment, I'd say, I think it's a real boon for creativity because you can come home, nights and weekends and put time into something that engages you in a different way
Yeah.
and gives you some juice,
Yeah. Yeah. I
Uh,
mean, these
yeah.
microphones are cheap, and and no, the structure thing is good. And I find like there's one day I'll give you this visual. I think you'll appreciate it. I had a backpack with me, right? And
Mhm.
I had in my workout clothes. I was doing a podcast thing live afterwards, which is not the clothing I would wear, for my day job. So I had workout clothes, podcast related clothes, and I was in my like work fit. And I was like, what am I,
Yeah.
Peter Parker? Why do I have wardrobe changes in my backpack? And then microphones loosely in there. And I was like, I got to sort this out. This is way too many things I'm juggling.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's definitely a tough line to walk because I think if plenty of people have jobs that run more than the 40 hours or
Yeah.
they're just mentally exhausting and where do you find it then? Where do you make the time? Because I do think like you have to prioritize and like make the time, but then you also have to have a life ideally outside of the job and pursuing essentially a second job with your artwork.
Yeah.
And that's where, that's the rub, right? How do you balance that? And let me know when you find out. I think it's definitely discipline comes in handy. Um, I think having, like if you have a boss, like shoot, being able to do video stuff now and being able to work from home adds a ton of flexibility. Having people that can be understanding to like life outside of work is big too. So I think that's the rub because you can do it, but it definitely has to be like the right fit in both regards for
Yeah.
job and creativity. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll say, especially with this podcast kind of taking off in 2020, where I think was obviously one of those periods
Mhm.
where work at home became much more of a thing. And I found myself splitting that time, figuring out like, okay, I'm at home all day. I could probably get an interview done at noon during that lunchtime. And
Mhm.
it's not really stealing, but it's really kind of getting that, being able to be flexible, if you will, because my office at home is also my home studio. So it serves that double purpose. Or even if it's like, I need a change of scenery. And it's like, oh, again, I have a lunch period. I have sort of some flexibility within the day that if I needed to pop over here to grab an in-person interview, I'm able to do that and still handle all of the things that keep me going, as far as the day job and all of that stuff goes. It just gives you, I think, space and opportunity to explore, what it is to be creative without having some of those barriers that are there, financially or access wise.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
So let's shift gears a little bit. Well, actually, a lot. Let's talk about your work with Charm City Fringe. Uh, how did it come to be? Like, I want to. What's the story? And what is it for folks that are undipped? Because I know it's a milestone coming up. But folks that are undipped, what is Charm City Fringe? What's the story? Which Fringe art? Just give us the data dump.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Uh, Indie theater. So it's an indie theater festival. Think of it like an indie music fest,
Yeah.
but for live performing arts. I think to me, that's the most fun way to describe it because I think that theater on the whole has a terrible rap for being expensive, pretentious, inaccessible, or over the top and like very quote unquote theatery, Broadway-y. And it definitely is those things, and that's fine. Um, but it's not just those things. And
Yeah.
so you're just like music isn't just classical music and the Philharmonic or something. You've got a huge range, and so we're really catering to, you know, alt theater, just the good kind of alt where it's exciting and different and new. Uh, we accept like a ton of different genres. It's an opportunity for people to try out just wild ideas
Yeah.
and absolutely some of the best theater I've ever seen. Also, some of the worst theater I've ever seen has come at our festival. Uh, and but yeah, it's that's what it is, indie theater, and we come in Fringe comes in at like a relatively affordable price. We do $15 tickets. We want the idea being that someone can come and, see two or three shows in one night
Yeah.
in like a really, small area.
Yeah.
Pop from venue to venue, or buy a pass and see, shows all weekend or all 10 days, But the idea being, you're just getting a ton, just like a film festival, or a music festival. You're exploring like a ton of different stuff and having a good time, having some drinks, and hopefully bringing a crowd.
So I see, that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, this year marks the 10th anniversary, 10th anniversary festival, right?
Yeah, yeah, we're in a weird gray area where it's our 10th. Well, I think it's our 14th anniversary, but our 10th festival because
Got
of
it.
COVID.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's our 13th anniversary, but either way, it's our 10th festival. And so yeah, it's uh really surprising to be honest, because those early years were lean. We started this was in that period where um we were underemployed, me and my friend and co-founder Mike,
Yeah.
uh, found ourselves working multiple jobs, working liquor stores, and wanting to do something that spoke to us more. And, one day I said, we've been writing this web series. We've been working on this thing for about a year. And I said, shoot, like the City Paper, you remember that, had this article on the Autograph Playhouse, which has now been completely revamped, and it's now owned by Figure 53, Figure 43. I'm completely blanking, but
I
it's
know you're
the
talking about, yeah, 53.
yeah, Chris Ashworth, and it's like this amazing spot.
Yeah.
And at the time, though, it was a semi-abandoned former movie theater, and it was running, underground theater shows. And I saw this article and I said, shoot, why don't we get a hold of this person? Let's change our web series. Let's rewrite it, put it on stage. We have a ton of friends in theater. They're all looking for work. Let's do it ourselves.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, that's a cool idea. I was thinking of something similar. I wanted to run, like, found a theater festival. Like, why don't we do that? And I was like, well, that's sure. Same idea, right? And I don't know why, but we stuck with that one. We looked at Baltimore. We said, they don't have a fringe festival. We have so much fringe theater, so much fringe art.
Yeah.
But like, how can you see it all? It's like it's hard to find it all. And so um, that was that was the seed. That's where we built it out from. And that first year, we went to Autograph Playhouse, and we had to wear jackets, and it was so cold that at the concession stand we sold soup, and we sold out of it because it was frigid and because there was no heat and there were open holes in the walls in the dressing room to the street. So, that was the beginnings. Now we're at a place coming up this year for our 10th where we have heat. If it happens to be hot, we have AC. The only holes in the walls are intentional and there are windows there. And yeah, it's a huge step forward. It's like those early days were fun, but it's nice to be where we are.
Yeah, that's great. So let's talk a little bit more about like Fringe festivals, like by and large, like they're celebrated, they're celebrations of arts and culture, and why is it important for Fringe festivals to exist, like, by and large, like, especially considering the challenges that artists face and being celebrated in their hometowns, like, I'm saying this selfishly, as a person that's sort of around it, and at times it feels like I get a little bit more love outside of the city, or maybe this isn't big and splashy enough for certain tastes. But for the most part, people like what I do, and people, are supportive, but it's only so much to go around. And, I think having sort of other options like a French festival kind of like opens it up. Like if someone is doing something that is a little outside of the norm, of let's say a production of a play, performing arts, that might not be that, okay, we can absolutely fund this, we can absolutely make this happen, but something that's a little bit more experimental. We speak on the importance of like French festival to kind of be more holistic of who's creative and who can be creative.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of nailed it right there, is that anyone can, and hopefully we're breaking down some of that barrier to entry so that anyone will be able to put on their own show, And we do have, as a lot of fringe festivals do, we definitely have more one-person shows than you would see out and about.
Yeah.
But we also do a really, we work hard to bring in both one-person shows and full companies. Some of these companies are one-offs that are put together for the Fringe. Some of them are existing companies that are trying to get off the ground or trying to workshop something new that they don't want to put on, the main stage, so to speak, figuratively or literally. And so it's an opportunity is what we're trying to provide, and that is for anyone, hopefully. Like we are covering by renting a number of venues. We do have a production fee,
Yeah.
but we're splitting that cost across a number of artists, whereas any one artist booking a space is going to have to pay the entirety of that for
Sure.
a 2 week run, let's call it. We're putting artists in 4 shows a day, and
Yeah.
so ideally, you're getting a audience that's going to come in and have the opportunity to see 4 different shows at that one space, and this year 17 different productions over the whole festival,
Right.
and um, splitting it. It's basically like cutting down risk, like both for the audience and the artist, so that hopefully you're seeing a bunch more. You're getting to try different things, and we're kind of like facilitating that, trying to give people that platform to, you know, the literal stage to try something out.
And I like the thing you said earlier about the comparison to like a film festival. Like I've gone to a lot of film festivals, and it's a variety pack, but it's like the sampler of it. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I want to look at more of this person's work. I want to see more of this, and having that opportunity to be exposed to it. And I definitely, because of what I do here, I get sometimes I get caught on how things are categorized, right? And so I'm curious on your thoughts in this context of categorization, especially when it comes to like sort of fringe work. Like, how do you think like labels perhaps like help artists and help like folks that are putting out work? Like, this is just like this, but it features this person, or that you might know this, but and then how do you think perhaps those labels could limit creativity? Like someone isn't as daring, even though they may apply and try to be a part of like fringe festival, but they're doing something that feels safe because that seems to be what sells and what gets attention. I joke about it in my classes when I was teaching. Everyone had the same podcast during 2020, and it's like, look, where's the originality, guys?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think man, I think labels help people.
Yeah.
I think they can help the artists, but I think they definitely help the audience because people are really risk averse. Like you're talking about spending your time and your money on doing something. Like I don't necessarily even try out new podcasts all the time, and those are free, essentially, right? Um, I mean, also there's just a proliferation of them, and so getting a reference or recommendation from someone being like, "Oh yeah, check this out," or like, "Here's a good one," that helps. Or getting a like comparison of like, oh, this person's kind of like Marin or whatever it is,
Right.
that's useful. And so then when you add in, spending money, that's even harder. And so being able to say that, this show is like Sleep No More, but with, Benjamin Franklin as the lead and he's naked. Not that that's a show we have had, though, now that I say it, like maybe,
You should just make it
but
happen.
like those kinds of things help people contextualize it before they drop the money, and again, we're trying to break that down by like keeping the costs low, but it's still like you're asking someone for part of their day and part of their paycheck. And so I think getting those comparisons can be really useful to say like, oh, you know what, this might be up my alley. Like it's kind of like Avenue Q or it's a riff on, Spider-Man, but it's all the bad parts where people hurt themselves. So like whatever it is, it's I think really helpful. And again, like once you're an artist that's known, you are the comparison point, you know?
Mhm.
But before that, I think like there are people who want just to like throw it to the wind. Like we have people that buy our all access pass
Mhm.
and go to literally every show, and they'll see some shows two or three times if they like it. And they just want the new experience. Like they're gung ho. I want to see everything because it's about finding the new thing. But
Yeah.
again, there's like the person who's like, I've got time for one show.
Yeah.
What am I going to see? And that's where I think it really helps to understand, like what's the entry point? What's the way in?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And as you're describing it, I'm just looking at like, all right, you know, when I'm around any festivals, and I would imagine a lot of folks do this, when I'm aware of a festival, one, I'm always glad that something new is happening in Baltimore or something that's happening in Baltimore. Sometimes we stack things, it's all on the same day, and it's like, all right, I can't get from East to West Baltimore that quickly. We'll see. But I think having something that's in an area, and you were touching on, like you said, 17 productions, right? Over
Yeah.
the what, 2 week period?
Yep, exactly. September
Oh,
26th is our launch party, and then the 27th to October 6th, it's going to be 17 productions. They each get a couple, 3 to 5 shows each, so that ideally you've got the opportunity to see any of them.
and that's the thing that's really cool or what have you. Like, as a person that I'm curious about sort of culture. I'm curious about sort of what is happening in a place, and an all access pass seems very interesting. Sort of being able to see what is happening, and it's right there because where are you guys like located? Just for folks that are unfamiliar.
Yeah, so if anyone is familiar, we were in Station North and Hamden the first 5 years. Then we migrated to the Bromo Arts District up until and through COVID.
Yeah.
And then excuse me, this year's our first year. We're going to be at the Peel Museum, which is
Right.
actually downtown. It's by Mount Zion Church. It's by the block, if you know where that is. But yeah, but it's America's oldest museum. That's their like pitch, and it is. It's a really cool old, historic building. Tons of different sized rooms, and we'd kind of been playing around with them for years about like ways that we might be able to collaborate, and it kind of just the pieces came together. Um, they came together this season. It just made a lot of sense, and it's going to be a bit of a departure, going into one building, but it's I think could be a lot of fun because you can really, hone in on the experience in that one space.
Yeah, I like that area. It's like, I've been to the Peel. I like the Peel. It's you
Yeah.
right downtown or what have you, and like, you have additional like prospects of like foot traffic. It's a touristy area once
Hmm.
you're like downtown, and I think it could be a win, and yeah, that's really dope or what have you. So I want to go into this sort of last question, and I do have rapid fire questions for you, by the way. I forgot
Sure.
to mention those earlier. So so lastly, like, sort of the hard or the soft pitch of what can folks look forward to for this year's like festival. Like, what is like top of mind for you? Not giving too much away, want to tease it a little bit, but also like what are you excited for personally?
I mean, it's I'm going to see as many shows as I can, and I'm super biased, but it really is fun to see, to explore, to kind of like enter this foreign area, culturally or creatively,
Sure.
and see what you can find, see what you uncover. Um, because, okay, in the past, we had some shows like the discovery of LSD, but it's told by the Swiss chemist who discovered it and Timothy Leary as the Cat in the Hat, and that was an awesome production by a Baltimorean, Chad Short. He's now in Seattle, but he was fantastic, and he put on a couple productions with us. We also had we've had oh gosh, Live Nukes, which was a completely wordless, you know, play, but not unscripted and not without sound. I mean, technically there was language and dialogue, but it was all in uh, gibberish.
Mhm.
But I mean, it was out hilarious. It was hysterical.
Yeah.
And, it's classically trained clowns, not the red nose honk honk,
Yeah.
the ones that creep people out, but two guys that are literally, one was in a red jumpsuit, one was in a blue jumpsuit. They just looked like people, but it was hysterical. And, didn't know that something could be that funny, uh, in such a way. This year though, we're gonna have, let's see, I mean, um, oh God, there's one that is it's a man wearing a Rorschach test mask, and it's called the Rorschach test. And I mean, frankly, he's a superhero that's taking a career pivot in middle age, and like
Yeah.
I don't know how else you can describe it, and I don't know how else you can like understand it besides seeing it. And
Yeah.
it's that kind of thing where it's like this is not, some of these shows aren't meant for Broadway, and it's like better that they're not. It's like it's going to be more fun. It's meant to be seen in this kind of avenue.
Yeah.
We have another show that's called Masala, and it's going to involve food, but it's a theater show, and that's actually the second time we've had a show that involves food on stage and audience participation in that way. We've got a show called Panic, which is bringing back uh, one of the people that was in Live Nukes and another guy that was in one of my favorite shows ever, which was called You're in Danger,
Mhm.
where he stood on stage and presented as if we were to the audience, as if we were the uh, homeowners association, the neighborhood watch group, and he's convinced that his neighbor's son is a changeling and he's going to kill him. And it was hysterical. It was funny because it's this person who's like we don't know if they're unhinged or if it's real, and it's it's wildly dark and comedic. And so we have them in this show called Panic, and I've no doubt that that's gonna be fantastic. And so yeah, man, just exploring all these different things. It's just a nice way to spend a few days, and I'm looking forward to that. Like that's why we work the whole year. Like a festival is 365 days in the making. You try to take some time off, after the festival, but you're realistically winding down, closing up shop, taking notes for the next year, within that month, And so the festival itself is when we get to have fun and hopefully share that with people coming out.
I love that. That's great. And it sounds like just eclectic, interesting, has that sort of that cult thing that's there. Like he's like, this is a cult classic. You definitely have to get in. So I love that.
Yeah, honestly, oh man, that's a great way to put it. Yes. It's like half the shows are cult classics. A quarter are going to be, you know, like maybe not even cult classics, like beyond cult classics. They might come back. Like we have had shows that have been hits and then gone on to other fringe festivals. We had one that went on to Edinburgh Fringe, which is the first fringe ever back in the 60s, and now the largest fringe in the world. It's the largest arts festival in the world. Um, and you know, yeah, it just spans that range. But I think, yeah, cult classic is like a perfect way to capture it. And so it's a matter of like, what's your cult? What's the one that you're going to get hooked on, or a couple maybe even.
I dig it. So that's great, and I'm looking forward to it. And we'll definitely tap back onto that in the as we close out. But
Definitely.
before we get there, we have a little business to attend to with this rapid fire portion of the podcast.
Oh, okay.
All right. So I got a few questions for you.
Hmm.
And as I tell people all the time, don't overthink these.
Hmm.
They're fun questions. So I'm curious, how many hours of sleep do you typically get?
Oh, that's it. Okay. So I am grumpy if I don't get 8.5 hours too many days in a row. Um, During the festival, it hasn't happened because we, thank God, got a producer the last few festivals, but there's a thing called fringe brain, and that's because you're working, you know, 17 hours at two jobs, one being fringe,
Yeah.
and you start forgetting like your friends' names or where you need to be. So that's what happens during the festival. Hasn't happened in a while, but yeah, that's during those days you get 5 hours. You need still 8.
Nah, that makes sense. How do you unwind when you're not creating art, you're not working on Fringe Festival? What do you do? What is that one that go-to thing that you do to unwind?
Oh man, nothing. Like legit sitting outside and just taking it in.
Yeah.
It's unwinding, you know? Next question, hit me.
What is your favorite late night snack?
Ooh, anything I can find. Um, I like salty. I like chips and salsa.
Love it. Here's the last one. You touched on this earlier in this sort of the beginning stages. I believe a soup was mentioned, or giving out soup was mentioned because it was so cold.
Mhm.
What
Yeah.
is your favorite soup?
Oh, oh my God. Um, I'm gonna say I had an awesome beet soup. One was in Seattle. No, it was in Oregon. It was at this Russian place. And then another time I had it, and it might have been Bulgarian, and it was in New York. But it was interesting. I like beets. You know, I guess I like the taste of dirt. I don't know. But it was delicious. So I'm gonna go with that.
That's it for the hot ones. That's it for the rapid fire questions for the hot ones.
Oh man, I was ready for like six more. If you think of them, let me know.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But that's kind of it for the pod. So there's two things I want to do as we close out here. One, I want to thank you for coming on and spending some time with me on this afternoon, going into evening, and two, I want to give you a few moments here to kind of do the hard pitch. Tell folks those sort of final details, sort of the shameless plugs of Fringe Festival, social media, website, all of that good stuff. The floor
Yeah.
is yours.
Okay, so it's fringe, like fringe on a coat. Just I say that because a lot of people think it's the French festival, and I probably should have started the pod out this way,
Right.
but it is fringe, like it started because it was the outskirts of a larger festival originally. It was on the fringe. So charmcityfringe.com. You can find us on Instagram at Charm City Fringe. Give us a follow. But yeah, I'd say get a pass, go to a couple shows because you're going to find something you really like, and you're going to be really happy you've spent a couple hours coming out. Tickets are $15, charmcityfringe.com/tickets, and tell your friends, spread it about. And oh, we've got a day night pass. I think it's a great way. A friend of mine actually met his wife, bought a day night pass, and what that does is it gets you two tickets for two people to two shows.
Nice.
So that you can come out and really have a good time. Wait, is that the date night pass? Doesn't matter. We have a date night pass, and you might meet your wife there. So think of it that way. But it's
Great.
It's a good way to like come out, save a few bucks, and see a good show with someone else.
And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Zach Michel for coming on to the podcast from Charm City Fringe Festival. And I'm Rob Lee saying that there's art, culture, and community in and around your neck of the woods. You've just got to look for it.